Hello, everyone, and welcome to another monthly Syxsense Masterclass. We're really excited to have everyone join today. This month, we've got a very important topic that we'd like to cover called the cyber kill chain. It's actually fascinating how attacks are made and the thought process that goes through somebody's mind when they're actively trying to attack your environment, and specifically what you can do about it. There's some things, there's some very small things, and there's sometimes lots of things you need to do to protect your environment. So welcome everybody today. As usual, I'm joined by a true expert, a true security expert that's going to help me an awful lot today. Graham, did you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Ron. My name is Graham Brooks. I'm a senior security solutions architect here at Syxsense, and spend most of my time implementing solutions for our existing customers or for new customers, specifically in the cybersecurity cloud space.
Thanks, Graham. And I'm Rob Brown, Head of Customer Success. We've been delivering managed services, including cybersecurity and patch management, for well over 10 years, and in that time we've deployed over 100 million patches worldwide. And you may be familiar that we also have a monthly Linux webcast that I joined Graham as well as a panelist. So if you have Linux and if that is something that you'd like to join, please head over to syxsense.com and you will be able to get access to all of the previous recordings. If you're joining us live, welcome. If you're not joining us live, you're probably watching a recording that you can get from syxsense.com as well. Go head over to the news page and you'll see all of the other masterclasses that we've got running. So to start with, I'd like to introduce the definitions that you're going to hear throughout the next 30 to 45 minutes. Some of these you're going to know, and some of these are a little bit different in the industry. So we just want to define exactly what they mean to us as you hear it today. So the sentence, the threat actor used a known vulnerability to attack Big Corp's web servers. So everybody thinks, the misconception is that a threat actor happens to be somebody who is actually trying to steal your data or cause a system outage or to deliver a virus. And that is true. There are cyber terrorists and there are also government-sponsored hackers as well. But there actually happens to be a lot of good guys as well. There are white hat hackers that are actively looking for vulnerabilities in software, in operating systems, and they're engaging with those vendors to effectively get a fix. And they don't actually want to exploit anything. They just want to keep your environment safe. You also have companies, paid organizations that do penetration testing, and they're looking for the kind of things that those cyber terrorists are actually looking for in your environment, those entry points into your network. So there are plenty of really good guys and a lot of bad guys as well, but we call those threat actors. They don't always fall into one category. Second would be vulnerabilities. And again, this is the second misconception around cybersecurity. Everyone believes that vulnerabilities, or from who we speak with, vulnerabilities are fixed by a patch. And they often know about these vulnerabilities because Microsoft or Adobe or Google are releasing updated software or patches to fix those vulnerabilities. There are plenty of other vulnerabilities. In fact, I call these other kinds of vulnerabilities my hidden worries. So as a security expert who is responsible for looking after thousands and thousands upon thousands of customer devices, I'm asked often what keeps me awake at night. What am I worried about? And I'm worried about the things I don't know. Vulnerabilities exist in more than just operating systems and software. There are configurations on your operating system. It's weak passwords. It's the fact that these machines don't have an encrypted hard drive, or there's registry keys that can be used as a jump point into another technology. Those are the hidden worries that you don't know because they haven't been patched. The fixes for those vulnerabilities are often quite complex. They may require registry key tweaks. They may require firewalls to be configured, antivirus to be deployed, etc. Not something that you can easily deploy with an update from the vendor themselves. And that is something that we are keen to support our customers with via Syxsense. So we have a security solution that can look for these other areas, not just patches, but vulnerabilities in general for operating systems and software, as well as user-based vulnerabilities where somebody doesn't have their screensaver on or locking their machines when they walk away. And we can actually remediate those for you. So just be aware, vulnerabilities are not just patches, they're not just pieces of updates that you can deploy. Some of those are quite complex, but the solution needs to be deployed regardless. And thirdly, it's the strategy, the defense model. What are you going to use to protect your environment? Now, when we onboard a lot of clients, this is very interesting. When we onboard our clients, we ask them how they're defending their environment, how they are protecting their organization. And we do get a lot of customers that come up with more of a homebrew approach, several ideas that they picked up that they put together, and their strategy is to kind of think like the attackers would think, or to do the things that industry is telling them to do, such as patch their environment. Now, if you have already gone to Syxsense.com and taken a look at our previous masterclasses, you will have seen last month we did one called the 6 vulnerabilities that every company needs to remediate. Now, it is important that in this webinar, we explain the thought process for those 6 vulnerabilities, because we want you to understand the process that those threat actors go through when they're considering how they're going to compromise your environment, and then in turn allow you to come up with a way of protecting your own environment going forward. Now, there are a couple of frameworks. So these 3 that we've listed here are 3 very, very popular frameworks. The first of which is called the Lockheed Martin Cyber Kill Chain, which has a fantastic title. And it is the simplest. It is the older model of the 3. And it is what we're actually going to continue talking about for the rest of this webinar, and the very, very valid reasons why. But there are also 2 others that are very popular: the Diamond model of intrusion analysis and the MITRE ATT&CK model, which, if you're familiar with CISA and you get those notifications, they will be basing a lot of their intelligence on the MITRE ATT&CK model specifically, as it is the recognized current standard, but it's really, really complex. So if you want to get started with the process, let's talk about the one called the Lockheed Cyber Kill Chain first. So with that, I'd like to introduce again Graham, who's going to walk us through the Lockheed Martin Cyber Kill Chain. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them in the chat. If I'm not able to answer that question, I'll pop that over to Graham to talk about at the end. So Graham, do you want to take us through?
Thank you, Rob. Absolutely. Cool. So we are today talking about the Lockheed Martin Cyber Kill Chain. And it's a series of phases. And each of those phases describes stages of a cyber attack, from the earliest signs of reconnaissance to the last portions of data exfiltration. There's 8 distinct phases in this kill chain. They are reconnaissance, weaponization, delivery, exploitation, installation, command and control, and actions on intents. The goals of the security architect is to build the security of an IT environment such that it's super difficult and very hard for a threat actor to move from one phase to the next. For example, the threat actor might be able to perform a reconnaissance of your company and find that you have multiple internet-facing assets, which they can be used to breach. A well-architected environment would make it unreasonable for them to attempt to push from that reconnaissance where they see these internet-facing assets into the exploitation phases of the attack. Similarly, if a bad actor were to decide to attempt that intrusion and say it's worth the effort, and then they were successful with that intrusion, it becomes critical that they not be able to make the jump over to command and control of your network. And this process just continues to go down the line as they move further and further into their cyber kill chain. Your job through this process is to slow them down as much as possible, because time is your best ally during the exploit process, because it gives you the ability to respond to the attack. So with that in mind, we're going to start walking through these phases, beginning with the pre-compromise section and reconnaissance. In the reconnaissance phase, bad actors haven't even started attacking your environment. This is the phase when an attacker is looking for targets. This process usually involves the attacker casting a wide net, port scanning their way through the internet connected devices available to them, looking for indicators of exploitable vulnerabilities. These reconnaissance attempts might collect data about millions of endpoints and then sift through that information for environments running out-of-date firewalls, single-factor authentication, VPN servers, or web servers with Log4j related vulnerabilities. The sophistication of these types of scans varies wildly. Some attackers will jump in feet first and start scanning anything they can find and exploit whatever they have immediately upon finding something vulnerable, while others will simply jot down that found opportunity and then revisit it later. The former is usually classified as a script kiddie attack. These attackers are unsophisticated and are looking for very low-hanging fruit. If their automated attempts at penetrating your network fails, they just move on. They're not interested in you. It's too much effort. The latter type of attack, the one which organizes their lists of targets and then purposefully selects their prey, these are the more frightening attackers. They often represent organized crime, hacktivists, or advanced persistent threat actors. Most attackers, especially the skilled ones, will use a combination of planned and automated attack and recon mechanisms. Now, it's a really important item that we have to address right here. It's the idea of my company is small. We don't have much stuff that could be picked up in an internet-facing port scan, so we aren't worried about our security policy. It's called security through obscurity. It's dangerous, and it's fiction. Consider the following scenario. Your company has 25 employees and no cybersecurity policy. You believe you don't need one because you only use work computers to check email within Google Workspace and performing super basic tasks. You don't have a domain, don't have anything that you had to set up, you just use Google Cloud. Great, a lot of companies do that very successfully. But you do have a shared Google Workspace that has confidential information held there. One of your employees clicks a link in an email. That link embeds malware on their computer, which starts collecting username and password information from that user's keyboard. Then, using that information, an attacker logs into G Suite, exports all your company data, and then sells it on the black market. And they do that without having to perform any vulnerability scan of your network. So, security through obscurity does not work, and businesses at all scales are impacted by cybercrime. That said, some of the recommendations we'll go through today might not matter as much if you're a super small organization, and if you do want to implement cybersecurity, which we do recommend, it's going to cost a lot less for you. since you have such a small environment. So just keep that in mind as we go through. So assuming that you are the lucky winner selected by a threat actor through the recon process, we now move on to the phase of the attack called weaponization. During this weaponization phase, the threat actor uses found vulnerabilities on your perimeter or internal network to begin building their specific attack against your company. This involves them mapping out your environment, its strengths, and its weaknesses. This process can be incredibly complex or brutally simple, depending on the mechanisms used to exploit a target environment and the security measures which you've implemented against them. In this stage of the security defense process, success for you is measured by minimizing the number of available vulnerabilities which a threat actor can use against your environment and successfully discover attempts to scan your environment. For the attacker, success at this phase means that they have found an effective mechanism and then prep that mechanism to persistently access your environment, preferably without you knowing about it. So here are a few high priority things you can do to help slow down the attacker during the weaponization phase. 1, implement an NIDS, which is short for Network Intrusion Detection System. That's a platform to provide instant alerting against unapproved scans of your network. Then implement an NIPS, which is short for Network Intrusion Prevention System. This is a platform which automatically implements rule-based network denials based on the discovery of an unapproved network attempt. So it'll see something from the NIDS and say, oh, based off of what the NIDS told me, I need to do X, Y, or Z. After that, we recommend strong DMZ and firewall rules so that all of your direct internet accessible endpoints are not also accessible to your internal network. And then 4th, this one generally is a lot more expensive, so probably limited towards larger organizations. Do hire an annual penetration testing so that you can find the things that you didn't know about. As Rob said, things that keep us up at night as security experts is the stuff we don't know about. Having a fresh set of eyes outside your team is going to help drastically with finding what those specific missed items are. So, assuming that the threat actor hasn't broken off yet, they've gone through reconnaissance, they've found your environment, and then looking through your environment using the weaponization process, they decided, yeah, we actually do want to attack this company because we think we can get away with it. If that happens, we're into this delivery stage. So during this process so far, your environment hasn't actually been invaded. They might have done some very minor intrusions during the weaponization phase to confirm that there's some opportunities here, but this has all just been the learning process. Now during delivery, the threat actor begins to action on the recon and weaponization that they've done. This delivery often takes form of phishing email for non-credentialed attacks where that threat actor doesn't have the ability to exploit a vulnerability directly on your devices. If, on the other hand, there was like a log4j scenario where they can get remote unauthenticated access to your devices, then they're going to start looking at using vulnerabilities to elevate permissions and figure out ways around your security platform so that they can put stuff onto your devices. During the delivery phase, your team has a few potent defenses at their disposal. First, the endpoint malware protection tools like Windows Defender, Malwarebytes, and many others provide the ability to not just detect and remove malware, but also to defend against the deployment of that malware, essentially blocking that discovery phase of the cyber kill chain. Often, those same malware protection suites come with a function which is called Host Intrusion Detection System, or HIDS. The HIDS takes the input of an endpoint protection tool, blocking an attempted payload delivery, and then delivers that report to a centralized service for review, therefore giving you much more insight into what the attacker is trying to accomplish, therefore giving you a little bit more knowledge that you can use to implement your defenses in real time against that invasion. So, assuming now that the bad guys have been able to put files in your environment, they haven't actioned anything yet, they've been able to put files in your environment, we're going to move into the exploitation phase. And that's assuming that they've been able to bypass your malware and your host intrusion systems. This is where they start to try and elevate their permissions. This is where they try to embed themselves in your environment and prepare for the actual deployment of their objective. Exploitation happens when a known flaw in a product, like the implementation of outdated SMB protocols, allows a threat actor to remotely transfer a file to the endpoint. And this is where the vulnerability management process becomes critical, because those vulnerabilities can be anything. They can be an outdated software, a file level permission that's inappropriately set, anything you can think of. Vulnerability management can also be really complex, especially when it comes to creating compliance around critical assets where patching is a super heavy burden. That's also where I pitch our product. Our whole suite is built around making that compliance process easy. Our toolset is helpful in pretty much every stage of the cyber kill chain, but we are directly focused at the delivery, exploitation, and installation phases of the attack. With our toolset, you can stop threat actors from finding purchase in your environment, all from a simple, easy-to-use interface. Whether it's deploying the AV suite, so that anti-malware product, reporting on server patching, or potentially deploying registry edits to fix a vulnerability. Our product suite is going to decimate the number of active, exploitable vulnerabilities in your environment and save the amount of time while doing so. Because at the end of the day, the lower your attack surface is, that's another term. Attack surface means the amount of vulnerabilities active in your environment that the threat actor can use against you. The lower that attack surface is, the harder it is for them to compromise your environment. Because right now, in exploitation, what they're trying to do is take a vulnerability, use it to gain some form of access to your environment after they've deployed a piece of software to a device. So, assuming that our toolset hasn't worked, assuming we don't have a reduced threat surface, we've got lots of active vulnerabilities, we don't have products helping minimize that context, our bad guy can now say, okay, I've compromised your environment, I know what I want to do, and now I'm going to install my malware on your devices. I've been able to deploy them successfully, so now I'm going to elevate permissions on your device one way or another, probably using a vulnerability, because it's never just one. There's usually 5, 6, 10 vulnerabilities being used, what's called a kill chain, to go from point A to point B so that they can do exactly what they intend to. So during that installation, again, their goal is to elevate permissions and initialize the payload which they've transferred to your devices during the exploitation phase. This usually happens either through a counterfeit authentication request or through the abuse of other vulnerabilities. So another term, counterfeit authentication, this is really important. Appropriate authentication happens when you click on the install button for a software and it prompts for your username and password so that it can install the software you wanted. The outcome being that the product installed on your computer provides only the functionality you intended it to perform. That's normal, approved, appropriate authentication. Counterfeit authentication happens when you click that button, put in your credentials, and then something you didn't intend to approve occurs on your device. The installation phase of the cyber kill chain is where providing appropriate end user permissions and end user training is critical. Many organizations allow their end users to hold administrator permissions on their devices. In this scenario, the barrier to exploitation for a threat actor is probably just a single prompt to the local user. That user may or may not know whether the prompt they're okaying is safe. That local user may not know when they're supposed to click buttons and when they're not, because they only do the work they were trained to do. And I've seen it happen a lot where people just automatically click yes to everything. So limiting the number of local administrator accounts in your environment is critical for the safe operation of a domain. And if there's no local admin on the device for the threat actor to spoof, or if the local admin is trained and careful with their permissions, then that threat actor will need to find alternative ways to gain system access. This is also a really useful time to talk about SIEMs, or Security Incident Event Management tools. Earlier, we mentioned the NIDS and NIPS, anti-malware, and also vulnerability management products. All of these products are important to secure the operations within your environment, but each of those products needs to have a place to store the information they collect. And a great way to maintain that data from all of your security tools is in a SIEM platform. These products are central dashboards which give you the ability to easily review all the logs which are being generated from your security and IT products, that you can then learn what's going on in real time from a central location. This is relevant to the installation phase of this kill chain because authentication requests are generally logged. The logs which are generated by a counterfeit authentication request can prove super valuable insight into the nature of the request. Knowledge is power, and the more knowledge your team has, the better chance they have of removing an active threat from your environment. This area is also where the term SOC or SOC comes in. SOC stands for Security Operations Center. Depending on the size of your company, your SOC might take the form of a managed service, or it might be an internal team within your company. Your SOC's job is to implement security compliance on endpoints and hunt down alerts of compromise which have been provided by the SIEM. Remember, as we go through the cyber kill chain, your best friend is time. The longer it takes a threat actor to move to one phase to the next phase, the more time your SOC team has available to shut down impacted endpoints and services and weed out that active threat. The SOC's job is to act on data to perform the corrective actions. They can only do that job if they have timely, accurate data provided by a SIEM. Okay, so we're starting to come to the end of the cyber kill chain story. And I will say, if the threat actor gets to this next stage of the attack, you're kind of lost. There is stuff you can still do, but you can assume that you've lost data, that systems have been compromised, and that you're probably going to have to send some sort of notice per legal requirements out to your customers if we get to this next stage. And that stage is called the command and control phase of the attack. Command and control is when the threat actor begins taking ownership of the devices on your network. During the command and control phase, your devices becomes the threat actor's devices, and they then begin phoning home to the threat actor, allowing them to take direct action on your environment at will and without any further exploitation. If your IT security team has not already detected the attack by this point, there's a really good chance that they're not going to. There are some things that you can do, though, to make command and control more difficult. First, implement network segmentation, which is a process which restricts the ability for an attacker to traverse your network. So going from your DMZ, the stuff that's on the boundary of your environment, to your domain controllers, for example. Also, implement DNS sinkholes as attackers are discovered. Sinkholes redirect the traffic that's trying to home phone to the attacker's central servers to null. So just send them to the ether. Don't let them talk back to the central server. On top of that, also implement network tar pits. Tar pits are fake endpoints that exist in your network that they're going to try and attack. They're going to try and compromise, and they're going to spend a lot of CPU cycles trying to take down these fake devices, and that gives you time back so that you can figure out what's going on. All of these network-based defenses can help make it harder for that threat actor to do the work they're trying to do. An example of how this can play out is the common practice of rejecting SSH connections originating outside the network without a VPN to an endpoint that's within the domain. Additionally, your NIDS, Network Intrusion Detection System, can help you find those unapproved connections, hopefully before it's too late, and then your NIPS, Network Intrusion Protection System, can say, hey, let's stop this before it gets any further. And so you can see we're kind of going forward and backwards along this cyber kill chain. There's a lot that happens concurrently, and a lot of things can move backwards a stage and then move forward 2 stages, all in the matter of moments. So you have to make sure that you're staying on top of what's going on. Okay, so now we get to the last primary stage of this compromise, and that's going to be actions on intent. And if we get to actions on intent, we're pretty much done. That's why we have a skull there. It represents your environment at this point. When we get to actions on intent, it's up to the threat actor to determine what they want to do next. So this could be a lot of things. It could be them simply telling you that your network sucks. That is something that happens. You'll have people who they're not quite white hat hackers and they're not quite black hat hackers, and they think it's a fun game. That's the best case scenario. But worst case scenario, your network gets locked down, the IP support line just starts ringing off the hooks, and skulls start dancing around your screen. That last bit doesn't happen so often anymore, but it is a reality.
Not unless you're in a movie.
Right? I'm thinking specifically, I don't remember the name of the attack, but early 2000s, there was a really brutal crypto malware that was sent around that would actually cause your screen to blue screen, and then a little ANSI skull would show up in the middle of your console from the pre-boot environment. So at this point, again, it's up to the threat actor to choose how they want to make your day miserable. So some threat actors are happy to simply steal your business critical information and then set up a botnet to earn some cryptocurrency coin off your computer's CPU cycles. That's a fairly mild version. Others are going to turn your company into a giant botnet, spewing DDoS attacks at other targets. That gets really complicated because now you are facilitating someone else committing a crime. So it can get real messy real fast. The most famous implementation of actions on intent, though, is when the bad guy encrypts your company's data, then sends you a polite email asking for coin in return for the decryption key. This particular element has crippled and even killed many businesses. If you're lucky, your anti-malware suite will pick up the transition of the unapproved software embedded in your environment as it transitions from passive command and control to the actual implementation of their intent. But this is also like relying on your car's bumper to save you from a car accident. Lots of things have already gone wrong for us to get to this point. The best thing you can do to defend against the actions on intent phase of an attack are to use tested offline data backups, strong incident response plans, and cybersecurity insurance. Tested offline data backups will give you a restore point to return to after the complete deletion of your company. Now, it sounds crazy. That's the reality we're talking about. Imagine you woke up and you don't have a company anymore. All of your digital assets are gone forever. A lot of people don't think that that can happen, but it happens way more often than most people think. So test your backups. Don't keep them in your environment where they can be compromised, and make sure that they're reliable. After that, make sure you have an incident response plan so that you know how to return your company to a working state after everything has been deleted. And then finally, make sure you have cybersecurity insurance. This can help keep your company solvent during the days, weeks, or months when you can't move product because you don't have a functioning company anymore. How are you going to keep everything afloat if you can't make money because you don't have access to your data? Cybersecurity insurance. There's kind of a fourth phase, or sorry, a eighth phase, thank you, in the cyber kill chain. Some versions of the model will actually show this as a separate phase, and some versions of the model will show this as part of actions and intent. And that's called the exfiltration phase of the attack. Exfiltration is adding insult to injury. Threat actors aren't generally content with simply ruining your active business operations. They also plan on collecting and then selling your banking information, employee documents, and customer records. This process is embedded, again, within the attack actions on intent phase. Your best protection against this exfiltration is what's called data loss prevention. Data loss prevention tools provide alerts when sensitive files and folders are accessed, and optionally provide role-based access to sensitive information beyond what would be provided by Active Directory. DLP products act as a final layer of defense, keeping the threat actor from claiming credit cards, social security numbers, and banking information. DLP products also often work within the context of your SIEM platform, alerting your team to the unusual or suspicious file access requests. These alerts can be yet another avenue of active threat prevention. I want to stop here for a moment and just say, how sad would it be to have your very first notice of a cybersecurity attack be an alert telling you that someone exfiltrated a social security account number from one of your employees? But sadly, that's pretty common. A lot of people find out after the fact. So there's a whole lot of content here that we've covered. And this is the simple model. Hopefully this information is helpful to you, but let's quickly recap the recommendations I provided throughout this session. So first, implement a network intrusion detection system to help find active threat actors on the perimeter. Then implement network intrusion prevention systems to keep those threat actors from entering your network. Then implement endpoint malware protection with host intrusion prevention to discover and stop those threats on your network from embedding their payloads on your devices. Then implement vulnerability management tools to minimize the attack surface of your environment so it's harder for the threat actor to embed their payloads across all your devices and hop, skip, and jump their way up your permissions. Engage a security information and event management tool to provide active monitoring of your environment so you can quickly detect attacks as they're happening. Use network configurations which block and restrict unusual network traffic. Implement data loss protection tools to protect your sensitive data. Maintain tested offline backups of your data so you can restore normal business operations after an attack. And finally, pay for cybersecurity insurance so you have a buffer of money when your company's down. That's a lot of information to take in. That's a lot of stuff that you need to do because frankly, threat actors are getting really, really good. According to the World Economic Forum, the average cost of a malware attack is $1.4 million. For some security organizations, the attack marked the last day of business for their company. According to Cybercrime Magazine, up to 60% of small businesses close within 6 months of being hacked. Our goal at Syxsense is to help companies of all sizes secure their assets so that they won't have to face a similar bad outcome. If you would like to call us to see if we can help around your solution today, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're going to have a little bit of a Q&A session here at the end in case anyone has questions around any of the 7 phases of the cyber kill chain.
Graham, thank you so much. Actually, I was just writing down a few questions. My keyboard, unfortunately, is quite loud, so I haven't privately responded, but I did get a lot of, I did see a couple of questions about tracking the creation of local admins. And actually, I want to add something to the back of that. So how would you track the, when somebody goes ahead and creates a local admin account, and I suppose if someone is creating a local admin account, there's only two main reasons I can think of, that it's intended or it's breadcrumbs, right?
Yeah, totally. So let's make a distinction. Domain admins and local admins. Domain admins are accounts within Active Directory that have local access to computers, but the permissions are held in Active Directory. It's traceable through AD. A local administrator is an account that has access explicitly to that device and nowhere else, and the password is unique to that specific environment, and it's not traceable through Active Directory. The context that is appropriate-ish for a local admin is if it's a device that's in a network where it will never have access to AD. You see this a lot in manufacturing environments where they support really old hardware that's required for business operations, and they put it behind a really restricted network, and they set up a local admin account. And when they do that, there's usually a very thorough change board process that your security operations team goes through to approve that local admin account and recognize what device it belongs to and keep track of who knows the credentials for that. That's the approved process. The unapproved process, as Rob mentioned, is the breadcrumb. You don't know why that's there. That's new. Who has access to that? You don't know. It's probably not a good thing. It's probably someone who has created the account for malicious purposes. You don't know if it's not, but it very well could be.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
You had another side to that question though, Rob. How do I know when that happens? Syxsense is a great solution for that. There's other tools out there that can help you there, but Syxsense is going to be able to tell you if you have accounts that are in local admins for a specific device and alert you across your entire organization. Say, hey, we see that you have 300 devices that have a local administrator account. You should probably deal with that.
Right. I just when I was reading that question, there's so many questions actually, and I promise we will get back to everybody with a private response. The reason I wrote that down is I do remember 20 years ago working for a company where I was going round to users' desks. There was no such thing as Syxsense then. Everything was done, physically, and I just logged onto the machine, created myself a local account because I knew the admin guy was about to leave and I needed to log on to the machine. I left the account. I didn't delete it, and potentially that's an entry point. But actually, the other thing I want to mention from a best practice standpoint, please don't please change or rename the administrator account. Number one, from a password brute force attack is they know a username called administrator may exist. Then they just have to go through all the different combinations of QWERTY, and there's many others that are super easy to guess. But if you change the administrator account to something non-specific to your organization, non-specific to your IT department name, then when you're tracing local accounts that have been made, if one appears called administrator, it kind of gives you a clue. And as Graham said, we can track the changes to membership on your devices. So if a new account is made or an account is added to administrator, we can report and send an email and say, hey, maybe this is something that you should be aware of.
Yep.
Super duper. Okay, I think, Jake, I think you're there. Do we have any other questions? That I did see so many. I was trying to write them down, but I thought I'll see if there's any other questions that have been asked for us today.
Yeah, so there was one really good one that I wanted to ask Graham. So somebody asked, do we need to implement everything on this list?
Yeah, great question. Yes or no. It really depends. It depends on scale. For example, if you are a mom and pop business and all of your employees work out of their home, all of the content around network intrusion, all that stuff is relevant to you, because we're in that context looking at office buildings with networks that have subnets that have contents within those subnets. So all of that content probably not relevant to you. Some elements of the SIEM service probably aren't going to be relevant to you either if it's such a small scale. Bottom line, things that I don't care if you have one computer in your company, you need this today. You need a tool that's going to fix and find vulnerabilities, whether it's patch content or other. You also need antivirus, anti-malware in your environment today. I don't care if you have one computer, you need it, because that one computer is your asset and you don't want other people attacking it. Trying to think if there's other core functionality that I want to advise. Oh, make sure that your one asset, if that's you, also has host intrusion detection enabled. So we want to be able to quickly know if there's something wrong. And you can see that with Windows Defender. If you've ever downloaded an application off the internet, you thought it was safe, and then you double click to execute, and then Windows Defender pops up and says, hey, what are you doing? I don't know what this is. That is your anti-malware suite doing its job. If you don't have something like that to cover your back, then you're leaving your company open. Even if it's just 1 to 10 assets, you're still going to need that sort of tool.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say to that is, even if you only have 1 or 2 devices, you really can't afford to lose those 1 or 2 devices. Patch it. You get the Windows update, set your device to auto patch if it's just 1 or 2 machines. Just make sure that all of your applications are up to date. Make sure Windows is up to date.
Yeah.
That will reduce the attack surface as a very minimum. And even if you're configuring Windows to do it, which isn't the best idea, but even if that's all you have, configure Windows to auto update.
I'm actually going to riff on that a little bit, Rob. So you mentioned if you only have 1 or 2 assets, you can't afford to lose those assets. Let's give you a scenario. You are some sort of contract lawyer. You don't have a big company. You are one person that works with big companies. So if something happened to your laptop, it's not that big a deal. It's a couple $1,000s max. You just replace it, move on. But you have so much important critical information available to you about some of these companies. If something were to happen to your device, a logger got put on your endpoint, someone started just perusing files from some of your largest accounts, suddenly it becomes a much, much bigger deal.
Exactly. Yeah. Perfect, Graham. Thank you. Jake, do we have any? I think we've got maybe a couple of minutes for any other questions if we had any.
Yep. So one more from Michael McCann. Isn't all of these predicated on you being able to interact/react?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what time is about. We could go through the entire cyber kill chain in a matter of minutes. Remember at the very beginning of this conversation when I mentioned script kiddies? Some of these processes are brutally simple. You have an environment that matches a known kill chain. These 5 to 10 vulnerabilities that are all set up perfectly in your environment. The bad guy, they just go, oh, I see you have a web-facing server that has log4j outdated. I now have access to your web server. Oh, I see that you have SMB version 1.0 configured on that server to another endpoint. Okay, now I'm traversing your network. Oh, I see that you have outdated, I don't know, something else. And I can use that something else to take my permissions from local user without admin and elevate it to administrator. They could go through that full process and take over in your environment in a couple minutes if you don't have vulnerability management tools in place. The point of most of the tools in the later portions of this cyber kill chain is to slow that down. So when they say, oh, I can traverse your network, they're starting to traverse it. You've got those tar traps put up, right? So they're traversing your network, but that's a really slow process, and it's creating a huge amount of noise in your SIEM product saying, hey, you've got someone who's pinging 4,000 endpoints right now. That's something you need to think about. So you can find that event, slow it down, and then your SOC team can evaluate and say, okay, it's coming from these 12 hosts. We're just turning off that network segment. Whoever's on that network segment, they don't get to do work anymore because we don't know what's going on. And then you can diagnose exactly what's happening and take action before it proceeds further down the kill chain.
Right. And I think the only thing I would add to that is that we would love to have technology take care of every risk for you. However, it's changing so rapidly that you will have to continue to check that your strategy is actually still working. And actually, I was working with some apprentice. I was doing an apprenticeship with some young students a year ago, and I said, you don't think your machine is going to be hacked? And we put a machine on the internet. We left it basic. We put RDP, which is the remote desktop protocol. We put it internet facing. Over the weekend, it did get hacked. That was just a random machine on a random IP address. Those are the kind of things you can do. If you want to know if you're actually being hacked, those are some very good, safe ways, especially if you can air gap those machines. Just pop them somewhere. If they get hacked, you know that somebody is trying to get in, and often they're just they're just ping sweeping a whole bunch of IP addresses. They don't know who you are. They don't really know your organization. But once they know there's a machine, that reconnaissance takes over. They start looking at who that could be, what they might be able to exploit. But if you do the foundation and you make sure that all of these areas are covered, then you do slow it down. And then when you do know that you're being attacked, and when you can see that there's evidence that you're trying to be attacked, then you have an advantage. Yeah, great question.
Yeah.
Super duper. I think that's everything that we've got covered off. We do have a lot of questions I'm afraid we will have to privately respond to. If you have any questions, or maybe specific questions around strategy, advice, even if you're not a Syxsense customer, it really is open to everybody. Pop us an email at info@syxsense.com, and either myself or Graham or one of the cyber experts in the team will respond to you privately. And we really appreciate everyone staying for this masterclass. We have many more coming, and if you want to see a breakdown of those other 2 masterclasses, please let us know. If we have 100 people that say they want to see one of those other 2, we will definitely add that into the roadmap. And we really appreciate your time today.
Thank you
very much. Thanks for joining.
Cheers.